Okay, let's dive into a really incredible story. It's about how a country's devastating economic crisis, we're talking near total collapse, didn't just reshape it, but actually ended up forging some of the biggest corporate empires we know today.
It sounds completely backward, doesn't it? How on earth does going bankrupt make your biggest companies stronger? Well, that's the central mystery we're going to unravel. How a moment of absolute failure became the launchpad for a mind-boggling concentration of corporate power.
To really get what happened, we need to rewind a bit. Back in the 1990s, South Korea was being praised as an Asian tiger. The growth was phenomenal. But behind that shiny exterior, the whole economic structure was, well, dangerously fragile. There were some serious cracks in the foundation.
So at the very heart of the problem was this incredibly risky way of doing business. The whole system was basically built on borrowing massive amounts of short-term money, loans that had to be paid back in less than a year, and then using that cash to fund these huge long-term projects that wouldn't turn a profit for a decade, maybe more. It was quite literally a ticking time bomb.
And this wasn't about some smart, strategic business plan. No, this was just expansion for the sake of expansion. The chaebols, these massive, family-run conglomerates, were getting into every business you can imagine. And the banks kept giving them loans, not because these ventures were actually profitable, but because of who they knew in the government. This just created these bloated, debt-ridden giants that looked powerful from the outside, but inside, they were incredibly weak and inefficient.
All right, so you've got this fragile system, this house of cards, and it's about to come tumbling down. And when the crisis finally hit, the solution wasn't a quick fix. It was more like radical emergency surgery, with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, as the surgeon.
And man, the collapse happened so fast. It all started when the financial crisis in Thailand exploded. Global investors got spooked, and they immediately started looking for other countries with the same weaknesses. They saw Korea's massive foreign debt, its weak corporations, and they just yanked their money out. Foreign banks all demanded their money back now, and within a matter of weeks, the country's foreign currency reserves were just gone. South Korea was officially bankrupt.
So the IMF comes in with a bailout, but it wasn't just a loan. It was a complete economic overhaul. The deal came with some very strict conditions, what they called a structural reform package. They basically said, we'll give you the money, but you're going to change everything. Force the chaebol to open their books, make them sell off their unprofitable side hustles, open the doors to foreign investors, and, this is a big one, make it much, much easier for companies to fire people.
Now here's where the story takes this totally unexpected twist. The whole point of this intervention was supposed to be dismantling the powerful chaebol system that caused the mess in the first place. But that is not what happened. In fact, it was the exact opposite.
And this slide just lays out the core paradox perfectly. The expectation that all this new market competition would level the playing field, break up the chaebol's power. But the reality, it turned into a brutal, winner-take-all cage match where the weaker companies were wiped out and the strongest ones became absolute titans.
The IMF's plan basically acted like a forest fire. It cleared out all the underbrush. Weaker chaebol like Daewoo just went bankrupt, totally eliminating the competition. At the very same time, the giants like Samsung and Hyundai were forced to get rid of all their deadweight, cut costs, and become incredibly lean and mean. The crisis basically created the perfect conditions for them to get even stronger.
But all of this transformation at the corporate level, this getting leaner, it had a profound and often incredibly painful impact on the lives of ordinary Korean people. While the corporations were thriving, society was footing the bill.
One of those key IMF demands was this term you see here, labor market flexibility. It sounds kind of neutral, maybe even good, but in the real world, for millions of Koreans, it meant one thing: mass layoffs. Job security was essentially wiped out overnight. And the result was immediate, and it was stark. You can see it right here. The number of non-regular, precarious contract jobs just skyrocketed. Those stable, lifelong careers, they were replaced with temporary positions. This directly led to the wage stagnation and widening inequality that really still defines Korean society today.
So yeah, the chaebol survived, and in the end, they thrived. But an entire generation of young people, the '97 generation, they were shoved into this brand new world of economic instability and just fierce, cutthroat competition for the few good jobs that were left. The entire social contract had been rewritten.
And this wasn't just a temporary dip.
This crisis didn't just cause a recession, it fundamentally rewired South Korea's entire societal structure. It created a lasting legacy of corporate dominance that's still felt today.
I mean, the sheer scale of this new dominance is just staggering. In some years, a single company, Samsung, has accounted for around 20% of the entire country's GDP. Just think about that for a second. The economic fate of a whole nation became tied to the success of one company.
The power shift was absolute. It wasn't about companies needing the government's help anymore. As this quote puts it so perfectly, it became less of a state with dependent enterprises and more of an enterprise-dependent state. The roles had completely reversed.
And this dominance now stretches into every corner of Korean life. Of course, they control the economy through exports and jobs, but that gives them immense political power, because what government would dare to oppose them? And it shapes society itself, creating this culture where, for young people, the path to success has narrowed to a single option: get a job at a chaebol or risk getting left behind.
So, the very crisis that was meant to discipline the chaebol ended up being the thing that cemented their power. It culled the weak, it supercharged the strong, and it transformed South Korea into a nation whose destiny is now completely tied to its corporate empires. Which leaves us with a final and pretty critical question to think about. What is the price of that dependency?